Why would the Bills' draft picks fail? Who were the veteran winners and losers from the draft results? And examining the UDFA class today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. I've got a 3-segment podcast for you today. We're going to talk about 3 different topics. Segment 1 will be covering why the Bills' 2022 NFL draft picks might fail. Segment 2, we're going to talk about veteran winners and losers from the draft. And then in segment 3, I'll talk about some of the highlights from the undrafted free agent class of players the Bills have added since the conclusion of the draft. But I do want to start with asking myself this question: why would the Bills' draft picks fail? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Brandon Beane brought this up last year, and it fascinates me. He said part of the evaluation process that they have when scouting football players is they ask themselves the question, why would this player fail in our building? And so I wanted to extend that same question to all of the Bills draft picks and answer it. Why would they fail? Now, we're obviously very excited and optimistic about all of these players. And I'm not trying to toss a wet blanket over the hope that exists with all these new, young, talented football players. But I do want to consider, if they don't pan out as players for the Bills, why would that be the case? And so let's answer that question for each of the Bills draft picks in this segment. We'll start with Kaiir Elam, the Bills' first-round pick, cornerback from Florida. This was very difficult, and I'll say the same thing about James Cook. It was very difficult for me to answer this question about Kaiir Elam because I think he's physically gifted, he's smart, he's instinctive, and he's wired the right way. He's a guy that embraces working and studying and doing everything that he can to improve as a football player. That's been evident in everything we've read about him, the things we've learned about him since he's been drafted, seeing the video of him during the combine interview with an entire notebook of coverage breakdowns from his time at Florida. This guy loves the game. He loves preparing, and he's gifted. So if I had to really nitpick and ask myself, why would he fail? 2 things come to mind for me. And I don't think either of these 2 things are fatal flaws at all. The first thing that came to mind was run defense and tackling. Kaiir Elam has to become a better run defender and tackler. Now, I think that would be okay if he never really becomes a great run defender or tackler. I don't think Trey White's a good run defender or tackler. But that could be something that limits him in terms of getting on the field and being consistent. The primary function of a cornerback is to play the pass and defend the pass and to cover. Kaiir Elam should do very well at those things, but I would like to see him become a better run defender and a more consistent tackler. The other thing that I have down is if the Bills task Kaiir Elam with a lot of off-man coverage. I like Kaiir Elam in press, and I like him in zone. But if you want to ask him to play 10 yards off the ball and stay in phase with a twitchy wide receiver, that's going to be a tough task for him. He's got great linear explosive athleticism, but his change of directions and agility, they're not great. And so don't ask this guy to play 10 yards off the ball and stay in phase with routes that are going to be on the horizontal plane. That's going to be a tough ask for him. So I feel really good about the way I answered that for Kaiir Elam, because I don't think the Bills are going to ask him to play much off-man coverage, and he has the right temperament to be a good run defender and a good tackler. He's got some technique stuff to clean up. All teachable. Now for James Cook, why would James Cook fail for the Buffalo Bills? Again, a tough question to answer because I think James Cook has a very clear path to what he does and how it can help the football team. But if I had to stretch and find reasons, I would say, first of all, that he's too much of a niche player, that he's just a perimeter runner and a receiving threat out of the backfield, and he doesn't offer enough in pass protection and is a between the tackles runner for him to really carve out a big role. And I'm going to go ahead and discredit my own point there by saying there's a lot of players in the NFL that are exactly like James Cook, that are niche players, that are speed, satellite backs, receiving threats that aren't necessarily great between the tackles runners, but have great careers. Look at Austin Eckler with the Chargers, for example, right? That's just one example. And so I'm not overly concerned about that. So maybe he doesn't have the frame to do enough between the tackles at 5'11", 199, kind of a slender, narrow build, thin in his lowers. But I think what he does bring to the table is still going to be a meaningful component of this offense. But to me, that would be, if he fails, it would be because of that. Linebacker Terrell Bernard, the Bills' third-round pick out of Baylor. 3 things down for Bernard as to why I think he could fail. First of all, his path to playing time is complicated. You've heard me talk about this. I think he's a guy that provides depth behind Milano, and he's a guy that I think you can put as your third linebacker on the field and maintain some of your nickel principles. But is he ever going to be a 100% of the snaps player like Edmonds and Milano are for this defense? And maybe that's a big thing for me to say. Well, maybe that's a hard expectation for me to put on him. But if this guy's a sub-package linebacker and special teamer and never really becomes a starter, that would be a reason why he would quote-unquote fail, because I think the path to getting on the field with consistency is a bit complicated. Then I would say his issues as a take-on defender, stacking and shedding blocks. He's got a real lack of length. Perhaps that's too limiting for clearing blocks and tackling. And then for a guy that's going to be a depth linebacker that can claim a role on defense, you expect special teams to be his calling card. And this guy wasn't on the kickoff team in college. And so maybe we find out why that is in the NFL. But I would say the path to playing time is complicated. His challenges as a take-on defender for getting off blocks, and then his tackle radius, and then, can this guy really be an asset on special teams? Those are the things that come to mind for me with Terrell Bernard as to, why he might fail. Let's get to Khalil Shakir, the Bills' 5th-round pick, Boise State wide receiver. 3 things down for why Shakir will fail, and I'm really high on Shakir. I think he's going to be an important part of this team. This is what I have down. First of all, that he gets the yips as a punt returner. I think he's going to be a really good fielder of punts, good hands, good body control, toughness, all those things, but you just never know how a guy's going to take on that role in the NFL. Number 2 would be that he doesn't have enough vertical upside, and defensive backs are aggressive with him in coverage. Where I think he has good speed. He runs a low 4.4. He's got good speed, but does he have enough field stretching ability that's going to force DBs from not being aggressive with him early in routes? Minor gripe. I think that's still okay. Cole Beasley's not a vertical threat, but he still had a great career for the Bills and for himself as a slot receiver. So I'm not overly concerned with that. And the other thing I have written down for Shakir is that he has a limited catch radius. I mean, only 29-inch arms, 70 3/8 on the wingspan. He just doesn't offer a whole lot of catch radius. Well, neither did Cole Beasley, right? So I'm not super concerned about these things, but if I had to ask myself and pin myself down and answer the question, those are the reasons why I think Shakir could fail. Punter Matt Araiza, San Diego State, Bills' 6th-round pick. 2 things written down, very straightforward. The reasons Matt Araiza would fail in Buffalo is, number 1, he can't hold. And if you're the punter, you got to be the holder. And you'd hate to see this guy not get a chance because he can't get the holding component down. But that's certainly a reason why he would fail. And number 2 is that he doesn't develop enough control with his leg. We know that this guy can kick the ball to the moon, but can he become more consistent controlling his kicks and reduce his touchback percentage? Those would be the things that would cause Ariza to fail. Cornerback Christian Benford, Villanova, 6th-round pick. You guys know I'm really intrigued by Benford. 2 things written down for him. One would be the level of competition is too big of a jump coming from the FCS ranks. How does he fare against better competition? Well, to his credit, he dominated the lower level competition. The Bills have a history of getting production out of small school defensive backs, whether that's Saron Neal out of Jacksonville State, Teron Johnson out of Weber State. That hasn't been an issue for the Bills in the past, but, Benford has to prove himself. And the other thing I've written down is that the depth chart is just too good in front of him for him to claim a role at cornerback, and he can't transition to safety, right? There's some appeal that this is a hybrid player that can play corner or safety. And Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, both of the Bills' starting safeties, they were originally cornerbacks. And so you can kind of see this very natural trajectory for Benford in that same type of arc. But yeah, I'm not going to assume that this guy can make that switch. He's got to do it. Then Luke Tenuta, the Bills' 7th-round pick, Virginia Tech offensive tackle. 3 things written down. He's got a really odd frame, 6'8" with sub 33-inch arms. You'd expect him to have a much bigger wingspan and have a whole lot more length for playing tackle. Number 2 is that leverage is just always going to be an issue. He fights his frame. He's so tall. And I know that that's somewhat true about Spencer Brown, but Spencer Brown has a lot more bend and flexibility than Tenuta does. And so, you go to play football at the middle school level, the first thing that you're taught is that the low man wins. It applies in the NFL. This guy's 6'8" and doesn't have good bend. And then just in general, does he have enough physical tools? Does he, he doesn't have great length. He doesn't have great bend. He doesn't have great flexibility. His lateral mobility is suspect. Are there enough physical tools for him to cling to for him to be an effective blocker in the NFL? And then one more pick, linebacker Balin Spector. My concern with Spector is that he just doesn't bring enough value as a linebacker. He doesn't do enough as a linebacker for him to stick on special teams where I think he can make an impact. So kind of this average college linebacker, good athlete, okay size, but does he bring enough as a true linebacker to stick on the roster and be able to help the team on special teams? So there you have it. The reasons why I think the Bills draft picks would fail in Buffalo. But again, I'm not predicting that for any of them. And I just wanted to kind of look at these players through that lens because Brandon Beane has told us that he does. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high classic, quality diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. If you're looking for fine jewelry, but maybe you're having trouble choosing, good news. Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Celebrating the special women in your life, on BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate thousands of fine jewelry options at every price point. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off a purchase of $500 or more. This podcast is exclusive, is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and this weekend's run to the Roses as the Kentucky Derby is back. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the veteran winners and losers coming out of the 2022 NFL Draft. Existing players on the roster that are winners or losers based on what the Bills did or didn't do in the 2022 NFL Draft. I have 6 winners and I have 6 losers. And I didn't mean for that to happen, but I went through And I made my picks, and I went back and counted, and I had 6 of each. So at running back, with the drafting of James Cook, Duke Johnson is a loser. You know, he was that guy that you looked at as the pass-catching specialist out of the backfield. Well, the Bills just made James Cook a second-round pick. And Duke Johnson is not going to beat out James Cook. That won't happen. Now, Duke Johnson has to beat out Zach Moss. That's what this really comes down to. And I have a winner as Zach Moss because Zach Moss now has this distinction as the only running back in this backfield that has that 220-pound frame that you really think profiles well to being your short yardage specialist and your closer, right? The guy that late in games, you're up big, you're just trying to grind out 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes a clock. The one that you look to is Zach Moss to do that. Now, I'm not saying Zach Moss has ever done those things consistently in the NFL. It's happened occasionally, but for the most part, he's been highly inconsistent. But I think that Brandon Beane is going to give the benefit of the doubt to the guy he picked in the 3rd round that's had injury concerns like crazy for the first 2 years of his NFL career. Very similar to some of the things he said recently about Cody Ford. Yeah, this guy's young. He's not really been healthy. Let's give him a real chance here. And I think that's what will happen for Zach Moss. I'm not sure it's going to work out, but I do think that Zach Moss comes away from the James Cook pick as a winner because he does have, quote unquote, the skill set that's now missing if he doesn't stick on the roster. So at running back, a loser, Duke Johnson, a winner, Zach Moss. At wide receiver, I do have a loser here. It's Marquez Stevenson, wide receiver from last year's draft. What's his path to the roster? It's really crowded to me. I think the Bills are going to keep 6 receivers. I don't think they'll keep 7. If they keep 7, Marquez Stevenson is in good business. But Diggs, Davis, Crowder, Shakir, McKenzie, Kumaro are all ahead of him on the depth chart. So unless there's an injury, I think Stevenson's on the outside looking in unless they keep 7. The drafting of Khalil Shakir put Marquez Stevenson on the roster bubble, and he might have already been there. But I don't know if this is good news for Marquez Stevenson that Khalil Shakir is in the mix, especially because Stevenson couldn't lock down the return guy roles last year, and I think Shakir has a chance to be the punt returner, and the Bills got to get that figured out. At tight end, the winner is Tommy Sweeney. And this guy's got to be ecstatic. I know the Bills only really kept 2 tight ends last year, Dawson Knox and Tommy Sweeney, but I do think they're going to roster 3 this year, considering they signed O.J. Howard, and my belief that 12 personnel is going to be a bigger part of this offense. And the fact that they didn't draft a tight end is great news for Tommy Sweeney. Now, we'll talk about Jalen Weidermeyer out of Texas A&M, the UDFA the Bills landed in the next segment. But I think that Tommy Sweeney has a very clear path right now to being the Bills' 3rd tight end. Now, the Bills didn't draft an interior offensive lineman. There were none taken. And to me, that means a winner is Cody Ford, especially on the heels of what Brandon Beane recently said about a clean slate for Cody Ford and working with Aaron Cromer and the fact that he hasn't had a healthy offseason yet to prepare for a season. You know, there's untapped potential here. And this is a guy the Bills traded up for. Picked in the 30s. This is a high pick. And I think he has a very clear path to being a rostered reserve guard for this team. Now, I don't know that he has much of a chance to start. I think the guards are going to be Saffold and Ryan Bates. But Cody Ford, them not taking an interior offensive lineman bodes well for his chances to make the roster this year and be a primary backup. At defensive end, the Bills didn't draft any. To me, that means Shaq Lawson is a winner. He's the Bills' 5th defensive end if you assume that Von Miller and then Rousseau, Basham, Epinesa are the top 4. Shaq Lawson being the 5th defensive end. If they drafted a defensive end in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round, you'd start to have to ask yourself questions like, will they keep 6 defensive ends? Probably not. And so now you have a draft pick up against Shaq Lawson. Unless the Bills were to make a trade like they did last year, they sent Darryl Johnson to the Panthers. So Shaq Lawson would have needed help, in my opinion, to make the roster. But now I think he's got a very clear path to being the 5th defensive end and challenging the rotation. And, last time Shaq played in Buffalo, he did real well. So I'm anxious to see if he can recapture that form and really provide a spark to this rotation at defensive end. At linebacker, I think you've got several losers. Andre Smith, Joe Giles Harris, Markel Lee. I mean, the Bills drafted two of these guys. Excuse me. They drafted Terrell Bernard. They drafted Balin Spector. I don't think Spector's going to make the roster, but Bernard certainly creates this to be, an even more complicated situation. So I think the Bills will keep 5 or 6 linebackers, probably 6. Edmonds, Milano, Bernard, Matakevich, Dotson. And then you have one more spot. Probably Andre Smith is a guy that I think is a true backup to Edmonds that has been a core special teamer for this team for a couple of seasons. I think he's got the upper hand to being the 6th linebacker, but for Joe Giles Harris and Markel Lee, it's a tough spot for them. At cornerback, I mean, obviously Dane Jackson's a loser here. Kyer Elam's going to start for this team. I've talked about this before. Every first-round pick under Sean McDermott has started almost immediately. 2017, Trey White, day one starter. 2018, Tremaine Evans, day one starter. Josh Allen, a starter after week 1. Ed Oliver, day one starter. Greg Rousseau, day one starter. We thought that wouldn't happen, right? Kind of a raw player coming out of Miami. The Bills had Mario Addison. They had Epinesa. They had Hughes. No, Greg Rousseau is a starting left defensive end for 17 games. So I think Kyer Elam's going to start. And unless Trey White's not ready to go to start the season, Dane Jackson's going to be the primary backup. And you love that. You love having Dane Jackson coming off the bench. But I think his opportunity to start has evaporated. And I think you can kind of lump Cam Lewis into this conversation because, if he thought he was going to make the roster this year, it's now going to be very tricky now that you have Trey White, Dane Jackson, Kyer Elam, Taron Johnson, Siran Neal, Christian Benford, another draft pick. To me, that puts Cam Lewis on the outside looking in. At safety, I think you got a couple of winners here. First of all, anybody wanting to keep Jordan Poyer, you're a winner because they didn't draft any safeties, and you'd think the Bills would want to try to get ahead of the need if they thought Jordan Poyer was going to fall off this roster after the season. They didn't draft the safety at all. Good news for the prospects of keeping Jordan Poyer. And also good news when it comes to the Jordan Poyer front is the contract that Tyrann Mathieu, however you say it, Honey Badger, that he just signed with the New Orleans Saints. 3 years, $33 million. He's 29. He turns 30 in a couple of days. And he's a 3-time All-Pro. He got 3 years, 33. Now, Jordan Poyer is a 1-year All-Pro at, 32, 33? He's older? To me, that's the type of money that the Bills can pay Jordan Poyer. $11 million a season. No problem. You don't think twice about that. So I think there's a lot of good momentum when you think about Jordan Poyer sticking on this roster beyond this year between the Bills not drafting a safety and the precedent set by this Honey Badger deal, 3 years, $33 million. The other winner is DeMar Hamlin, Bills' 6th-round pick out of Pitt last year. Again, no safeties drafted. He's got a clear path to being the 4th safety again this year. Just has to beat out Jordan Thomas. Special teams, the obvious loser is Matt Hawk. The Bills drafted a punter, which is a signal that they want to replace Matt Hawk. They should want to replace Matt Hawk. Matt Hawk is not as gifted as a punter as Matt Ariza is, and it puts him firmly on the roster bubble, and I think this is Ariza's job to lose. He just has to show that he can hold. Summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw them in your bags and your kids' bags. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. And all the Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And have you tried the Puffs? We're going crazy for the Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. Who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? And they're only 140 calories. Sign me up. And if that's not enough flavor for you, you might want to try the mixed box. The mixed box comes with 12 flavors of bars and puffs. Built Bar makes sure that there's something for everyone. Got a deal for you? Go to built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. No business owner wants to deal with the hassle of energy decisions. You just want your business to run smoothly and to pay a fair rate for power. But coming off the back of one of the highest price winners in the last decade, if your business was on a purely variable or market rate, you paid out the nose. Many New York business owners switched suppliers out of frustration, but unless they chose alternative pricing options, they're still at risk for a January repeat. Catalyst Power partners with you or your trusted energy consultant to provide a power supply plan that fits your business and your market risk tolerance. We have a suite of options customizable to your business's needs, including options that bundle with or focus on renewable energy. Right now in New York, we're offering an on-site solar solution for your business that requires zero installation, maintenance, or material purchase costs. That's right, no CapEx costs for you. And to sweeten the deal, qualified businesses could be eligible for up to 6 months of at-cost energy supply from Catalyst Power. Go to catalystpower.com/LockedOnBills to learn more. All right, let's touch on this UDFA class that the Bills assembled after the draft. I think it's pretty underwhelming, and I think that's going to be our expectation because the Bills are a deep, talented roster that's tough to make, and UDFAs want to go to places where they got a chance to make the roster. Buffalo's not going to be that spot. The Bills are an attractive place for veterans to come, not an attractive place for undrafted free agent rookies to come. Now, I think there are two really interesting players that I want to talk a little bit more about. Jalen Weidermeyer, the tight end from Texas A&M, and running back Raheem Blackshear from Virginia Tech. Those are the most interesting players that the Bills added. They also signed or agreed to terms with Neil Powell from BYU, a wide receiver. Keith Corbin, wide receiver from Jackson State. He was productive last year for Jackson State. Wide receiver Malik Williams out of App State. Defensive end Kingsley Jonathan from Syracuse. Really fun story. You guys should read about that. Got caught up in some human trafficking stuff, and really interesting story coming from Nigeria at a young age, and just a lot there if you want to research that. Defensive tackle Prince Emili from Penn, and cornerback Trayvon Fuller from Tulsa. Let's talk about the two guys that I have the most interest in. One of them is Jalen Weidermeyer. I figured the Bills would be a very attractive spot for a UDFA tight end to come. You know, we just talked about it. Tommy Sweeney in line to be the third tight end. So all Jalen Weidermeyer has to do is beat out Tommy Sweeney, and he's going to make this roster. And so you like that for him. Now, I have my concerns about Weidermeyer. And I know that a lot of people hyped up Weidermeyer like in early in the season, the last couple of years, and that's because he's made some crazy good plays for Texas A&M. He's been a productive player, and he's made some insane catches. There's no question about that. He's got great hands. He's got great ball skills. He's got good size. But there are other things about his evaluation that are limiting that has me concerned. There's a reason this guy didn't get drafted, despite being a productive player in the SEC with good size. So he's 6'4", 255. He's a terrible athlete. 5'01", 40-yard dash, 1.78, 10-yard split, 25.5-inch vertical jump, 9-foot, 1-inch broad jump. You watch this guy on tape, and you know that he's not very athletic. But you're hoping that when he tests, that there's more there than what you see on tape. And maybe he's just playing slow. Kind of like Jelani Woods from Virginia. You don't see a ton of juice on tape, but he tests very, very, very well. And you get excited about him using his athleticism more on the field to increase his play speed. With Jalen Weidermeyer, you got the opposite. You got a slow player on tape, and you got a slow player that in terms of how he tested. And so separation quickness, running routes, getting away from man coverage, winning after the catch, range as a blocker, all of those things are not in Weidermeyer's real wheelhouse. This is a guy that you're relying on to be leveraged at the catch point and use his hands, size, and ball skills to finish. And for a 255-pound tight end that's weighed up to 260, you'd like for this guy to be a better blocker. And so he's got some appeal to me, mostly based on the only thing he has to do is beat out Tommy Sweeney, but he's got a very below average physical gifts. And for a bigger tight end, he doesn't block well. No, maybe he can develop there, but I don't think that this guy has a high ceiling to develop into as a pass catcher because I don't think he has enough athleticism to really become a guy that gets open with consistency in the NFL. Now let's talk about Raheem Blackshear. Virginia Tech was originally at Rutgers. This is a player that I did a full evaluation on. And so let me give you the summary of my scouting report so you can get an understanding of what this player is. And you'll learn real quick that the Bills wanted to add pass catchers at running back. This is what I said about Raheem Blackshear. Raheem Blackshear began his career at Rutgers and developed into a key player in the offense and earned team captaincy in 2019. His season ended abruptly after 4 games where he chose to bench himself and take a red shirt to preserve eligibility. He then transferred to Virginia Tech and had his best season in 2021. Blackshear is a smooth runner with good vision, balance, and toughness. He works from a balanced base and does well to anticipate creases and run to daylight. He's an accomplished pass catcher that took a step forward in pass protection in 2021. He's a versatile player that can run inside and outside while showing proficiency in both zone and gap blocking concepts. When it comes to concerns, Blackshear is a bit of a one-speed runner that lacks a true second gear. He doesn't project well to winning after contact at the next level, and for a back of his style and body type, his dynamic athleticism leaves something to be desired. Blackshear has a baseline skill set with appeal as a pass catcher with an overall modest physical upside. He has the ability to claim a role, but providing the most value possible on special teams and passing downs will be important for him to stick. So I think he's a really interesting pass catcher, but has his own limitations. He'll be a stash on the practice squad guy, but he has some level of intrigue to me just based on him having some nice flashes at Rutgers and Virginia Tech. Again, I don't really see the path for him, so that's going to be challenging. But I think the best 2 players the Bills found in undrafted free agency were Weidermeyer and Raheem Blackshear. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast and this week on the podcast. We have a fun week coming for you next week. I mentioned we're going to have the What Would Marino and Nolan Do in the Draft annual episode that we do. So we'll tell you what we would have done differently than Brandon Beane and a bunch of other fun off-season content coming your way next week. So make sure you don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again on Monday.